My fiance was just running by there.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I should have waited till I
No
pushed the
worries.
button. No worries, we haven't started yet.
All
Okay,
good.
continuing on to Holly Shorts. Michael Pomeroy, who's been incredibly patient waiting for me to get to him. He has this amazing film. I will just leave it at that. I won't add all the other commentary until later. So thank you so much for being here. You are my third Brooklyn guy today, which I'm super excited about. So I want to start off talking about New York for a bit. To those that maybe have never been there before, and I'm not sure if you've actually filmed directly in Brooklyn, and if you haven't, that's fine. So if you have, please address what would be beneficial for a filmmaker to film there. And if not, just tell us a bit about why you think Brooklyn's so special.
Yeah, it's a great question. This is my second feature film, Paul and Greg and Amelia, that's coming out. Um, it is shot completely in Florida, so this production was actually not set in New York at all. There is a huge New York tie-in with the story. The two of the characters live in New York and are down in Florida to visit some old friends, and the friends in Florida are ex-New Yorkers. Um, and then my first feature was shot primarily in Columbus, Ohio, where I am from originally, and the story is based there as well. But probably about 10% of the movie takes place in New York City, so we had some pickup shoots in New York to complete that film. So, from a narrative perspective, my filmmaking is somewhat limited in terms of the work I've done in New York. That said, before I got into making features, I got my start in stand-up comedy, and was making comedy web series type videos, shooting around New York. And the greatest thing about shooting in New York is just the access to the network. Like, it's New York and Los Angeles as far as like the largest networks of people to work with, and um, there's a great collaborative spirit here too. I think there's a little bit less industry pressure in New York City relative to Los Angeles, so
Sure.
a lot of good art comes out of here, and I think it's a good place to be at the stage that I'm at in my filmmaking career. Making independent films outside of any sort of studio system. I kind of see this environment here as more of an incubator to, someone who's at this stage like myself.
Understood completely. Now, I found it interesting that you have a bachelor's in English and currently you are serving as a filmmaker. And while English does relate to film, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. So I'm just curious, what made you want to pursue English as a major?
Yeah, I loved creative writing as a kid in, middle school and high
Yeah.
school. As soon as I got to college, I knew that's what I wanted to study. My college actually didn't offer film school. That was not a part of our curriculum. So if you wanted to do anything creative, there were the visual arts, there was creative writing, there was also theater. And I'd say I caught the film bug about midway through my college experience. So at that point, it was a little late to look into all the film schools of the world. And I didn't want to leave my school because I loved all my friends. So creative
Yeah.
writing was kind of the natural extension, just because at the time I knew I wanted to be a writer. I knew I wanted to do stand-up comedy, which I don't do anymore. I'm now just a writer and film director. But yeah, at the time I wanted to write comedy movies and perform comedy, and the creative writing track was sort of the best option. And my college also offered screenwriting classes as well, so that was part of the creative writing curriculum. So yeah, I fell into this via screenwriting of all things.
Very cool. If I were to ask you if you wanted to give advice to anybody watching today, there are some that believe that being a writer requires formal education, and many of us who never finished formal education did pretty well. So looking back now, would you advise a writer to get into that field without education, or you still stand by that choice?
I still stand by the choice. I think it depends on the person. I'm someone who really got a lot out of my creative writing education, both for my bachelor's as well as my MFA. I got a creative writing MFA and fiction degree as
Yeah.
well. Um, but honestly, the two most important things that you can do as a writer, in my opinion, are read a lot and then write every day. I probably read 30 to 40 books a year, and then I write anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a day. I'm always writing, whether it's working on screenplays. I have a couple of unpublished novels that always end up on the back burner while I'm finishing these feature films of mine over the last 6 years. So one day, if I don't get distracted by a third feature film, I'd like to finish one of those books. But um, yeah, writing every day and reading every day are just as important, if not more important, than any sort of formal writing education. I do think, though, it is helpful to have some sort of uh, critique group, which the writing programs, both undergraduate and graduate schools, do a good job of facilitating. You get in a writers group, you get other people to critique your work. You get to be a part of a network of writers who are also trying to grow and develop their skills, and that's immensely valuable. And then at most of my class experiences, I was getting to work with and get feedback from teachers who all had published novels. Some of them were, National Book Award semifinalists and things like that. So getting exposure to people who have been there before and had work published, they know what works in the marketplace. That was very valuable for my formal writing training as well. So it's certainly not a requirement for people who are trying to start out, and I don't even think it's the most important thing. But if if leveraged to the most degree as much as possible, like you can get a lot out of it, but certainly not a requirement.
Sure. Now, I was going to ask you, of course, about the comedy shows, but you've kind of put the X on that and said, no, you're not doing them anymore. So I'm disappointed. What made you gravitate away from doing that?
Yeah, it was sort of a couple factors. So like I said, I moved to New York about 10 years ago, started in stand-up comedy, was writing a lot of screenplays, and through all that, I fell in with an amazing network of other comedians, and we started making comedy videos together, like a lot of people do. And this was all pre-TikTok. This was like 2016 to 2020. I feel like TikTok
Yeah.
really blew up during the pandemic in 2020. Um, so we were making like comedy style web series videos. My collaborators Matt Hardy, who's an actor, and Paul and Greg and Amelia, as well as a fellow collaborator Luis Galloway, who acted in
Yeah.
my first film, The Rest of Your Life, and he's now pursuing acting and comedy out in Los Angeles. Yeah, those guys, we created this web series together, and that's where I really discovered my love for directing, in addition to writing and performing comedy. And around that time, after we released that web series, I think the pandemic hit maybe 2 weeks after. We had our big watch party at a bar in Brooklyn and rented it out with like 100 other friends and comedians. And
Sure.
it was sort of a, philosophical or spiritual alignment moment of, I'm starting to do all this directing. I've got this screenplay, The Rest of Your Life, which then we later shot in the summer and fall of 2020 during COVID, and that's a whole other
Yeah.
story. Um, and it was just like the right timing. All the comedy clubs had closed, all the bars that host comedy shows in New York had closed, and it was just sort of a forcing function for me to say, okay, what is it that I really want to do artistically? And I think as you get a little older, you sort of have to pick. Like I was pursuing 10 different art forms, right? Like comedy, acting, improv, stand-up, writing, fiction, directing, and I just sort of had to, say, okay, this is what I really want to focus on. This is the thing I care the most about. And at the end of the day, I just love movies more than I love comedy. I don't watch as much stand up as I used to, but it's pretty rare that I'm not watching at least one or two movies a week. So
Got it. Understood. I totally get that. Now, I've seen in the past that you've traveled to places such as Tokyo and England and you're a world traveler. So I'm curious, is that more so for the film side of things, or are you just fascinated by different cultures?
oh yeah, more so personal. I absolutely love to travel. That's so nice that you asked about that. Yeah, I've had some great trips to Japan and all over Europe, both like backpacking with friends and then doing, nicer trips with family and such. And then my MFA program in creative writing, we had a 2 week residency in England where we got to, basically do like a exchange program and get, um, an immersive writers workshop experience with faculty and staff in England. So that was a little bit more of like academic tourism, I guess you could say. But I just think it's really important to um, see the world, especially as a young person. I don't have kids yet, so I'm trying to do as much travel as possible because I hear that it gets harder from friends who do have children as you get a little older. Um, but yeah, I think it's like anything that I consume, art, museums, movies, film, books. It all contributes to what I'm trying to make, but that's more of a personal passion on its surface than direct exploration. And then I've done a little bit of work out in Los Angeles, just working on some shorts and stuff, but nothing too. nothing too formal.
Gotcha. And of course, you don't want to forget to mention you're getting married. So I'm always curious to ask, is she a creative? Is she in the industry? Will she be in a film? Has she been in a film?
Oh, you're so sweet to ask. Yeah, I got engaged recently. My fiance works in the interior design industry, and
Okay.
she was our costumer for this recent film that's coming out. And I'm maybe I'm biased, but I think the costumes look pretty incredible on our four lead actors. So, yeah, that was a fun collaboration as well. So.
I imagine so. Thank you so much for that. I'd like you to talk a bit about back in 2020, you did the television series Graham Avenue. Can you tell us a bit about that? And is that something that we can see?
Yeah, absolutely. So Graham Avenue was that web series that I mentioned that I made with
Right.
my fellow collaborators, Luis and Matt. It's still available on YouTube. Um, at the time, we were wanting to make something that was like a big, you know, push or onus that we really felt. We had been doing podcasting together, and we had been performing on each other's stand-up shows together, and we wanted to make something that had a little more staying power or quality to it versus just like a lot of the social media videos that were coming out around the time. Um, it was heavily improvisational. We would have like a rough outline and then we would film it, kind of like a Curb Your Enthusiasm style Larry David type scene. We would have an A to a B. We would know where we want to go, but we didn't write any formal scripts. But yeah, we wanted it to be something a little more long form. The episodes are anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes. Um, we were very inspired by, people like Lena Dunham, who are probably, 10 years ahead of us on the web series curve.
Okay.
I think we were just a little bit late to that trend, but yeah, we're super proud of how that web series turned out. We had so much fun screening it for our fellow comedians right before the pandemic hit. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I'm actually starting to see more of this web series thing coming back on YouTube. I think it kind of fell away for a while with
Yeah.
the pandemic and short form TikTok and verticals, but I feel like everything in media is trends based. And I think that web series that trend will come back around. So maybe we sort of hit a dip in terms of the curve of, those things were really popular for launching a lot of filmmakers' careers in 2010. I think Broad City was also a web series. Don't don't quote me on that. Maybe you could fact check that after. Um, and then they kind of went away for a bit, and now I think they're kind of coming back. But yeah, we just really wanted to play around with that form and do something a little more long form compared to like a lot of the social media stuff that was coming out at the time. And yeah, we got to feature a lot of New York comedians who we love to work with and do shows with at the time. So that was a nice foray into longer form filmmaking. So.
Gotcha. Now, for this current film that we're talking about now, Paul and Greg and Amelia, you play the role of Scott. So I'm always curious to ask this. When the head creator decides he's going to put himself in a movie, I'm like, how does that work exactly? Are you telling yourself exactly where you should be, what you should do, how big of a role you get?
Yeah, it's interesting. My first movie, I was playing the lead in addition to writing and directing it. So
Hmm.
this role of Scott is a very minimal, almost cameo style role, right?
Yep.
Obviously, there's a rich tradition of directors having cameos, both large and small. I feel like a lot of times it's just like Hitchcock running through the background in a shot,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, this scene came together where Greg, one of the leads who plays this rich tech bro who the world is really crashing down on him with this pending indictment, and he has his friend who's visiting him, Paul, who's he's quite suspicious of. Um, we kind of wanted to show this sort of darker side of his character in the script, and it really wasn't even conscious. Like after the script came together, I said, "Oh, I think I want to play this guy." One, it's one less actor we have to cast and deal with, and two,
Right.
it would sort of give me the fun itch of having that director cameo experience. But it was very conscious in the sense that I knew I did not want to have a big in front of camera role in this project.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm not really doing much acting. I'm more focused on being behind the camera, writing and directing, producing as
Yeah.
well. Um, but so yeah, that was sort of a fun way for me to do a cameo. But I think in the future, my cameos might have even fewer lines than in this film.
So I want to ask this. I realize this is your second feature film. So were there any mistakes or things that you learned on the first feature that you remembered not to repeat on this second one?
Oh, totally. I mean, in so many ways, Paul and Greg and Amelia is born out of the mistakes or things that we wish we could have done differently on movie one. I mean, yes, there was the writing idea. There's all every movie I think starts with an idea. In this case, it's like two friends growing apart, growing at a Y. But with the rest of your life, my first movie, we made that movie for less than $30,000. There were almost 30 actors. There were close to 15 locations. I mean, the scope and scale of this thing was insane.
Sure.
It was a lot of fun. We called in every favor in the book for, locations, friends and family back home in Ohio to open up locations. And, most of the comedians were working for barely any money at all. A lot of my friends were the crew, the production company we partnered with had a lot of, film students helping us out with the making of the film. Everyone was wearing five different hats. It was a lot of fun, but logistically, it was a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
So we're really proud of it, and we think we made like this really fun buddy comedy. But like the budget shows just because we were trying to bite off more than our budget could chew, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we still got distribution, and it's on Tubi, or people can rent or buy it on Apple and Amazon. And like I said, like it's a comedy we're really proud of. But the big focus with Paul and Greg and Amelia was having a script that was contained. It all takes place in one location.
Hmm.
Um, we had just four principal actors in the cast, one supporting actor, and then myself for that cameo you alluded to. And we had a much yeah, like I said, the one location, the smaller cast, and just a slim down focus. Like there were no crew moves. Everything was contained. So that was a big focus as well. Even in an early draft of Paul and Greg and Amelia, or PGA, which is the acronym we developed a shorthand for, kind of like the golfing league. We were just very conscious about the scale, and even things like music licensing. We licensed very little music relative to the previous film, which had quite an extensive uh, music licensing effort around it. Most of the cues in this film were original compositions. So
Nice.
for any indie filmmakers out there consuming this interview, that music licensing stuff can get pretty tedious and costly. So
Yeah.
it's good to avoid it if you can, I think, at this kind of scale.
You betcha. Jacksonville Beach, Florida is the exact location for where the film takes place. So why that particular area in Florida?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the film script is technically set in South Florida. We're never too explicit about it
Yeah.
in the actual production, but it's somewhere in Florida, and I think that sort of allows the imagination to, do whatever you want with it. The way we landed on Jacksonville Beach, which isn't officially called on the script, is a friend of our cinematographer, Cal Green, a family friend of his parents. They had this great house, and they were willing to, make a nice deal for us to use it for a few weeks to shoot. So that's how we landed on Jacksonville Beach, Florida. We were originally looking in places like Tampa and Palm Beach. We looked at a few houses on some scouts, but that was the one that came together. It had the right availability. The ultra modern glass windows look of it all was a cinematographer's dream. So it
Yeah.
was just one of those things of connections, timing, luck, availability, and that's how we picked Jacksonville Beach.
Yeah, it is a beautiful location. I think everybody who watches this is going to be like, dude, I need to live there. I'm not a fan of
Totally.
Florida, but I'm like, that house is like, oh my gosh, over the top. So number one, you have a great location. Number two, and this is just me speaking, I think all four were very perfectly cast. Literally, every single lead actor that you have is wonderful. If I were to say one that stood out and one that won an award, that would be Christopher Ryan. So I'm super excited about that. I don't want to be alone with him, I feel like, because he just looks a little creepy and you don't know what he might be up to. So tell us a bit about what made Christopher the perfect fit for you for the lead, one of the leads.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, Chris is just such an incredible actor. I've said this to everyone I've talked to about this film. He's going to be one of those actors who breaks out in his 40s and becomes a household name. I truly
Sure.
believe he's an immense talent. I mean, everyone in this cast is so talented, but Chris has, almost 20 years of doing theater in New York. He's done Shakespeare and regional theater all around, the tri-state area. He's currently doing a play at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival right now in Scotland. I mean, he's just immensely talented, and he's literally never not working. He's never not on a stage, and he's a director as well. Him and I met through some mutual friends maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and right away when I met him, I just said, "This guy's got a great look. You know, he's got the strong cheekbones, and
Yeah.
he's got a little bit of that Texas twang from growing up in the Dallas area, and he's just kind of an interesting looking person to start. And then you see him on stage, and you're like, holy shit, this guy can act, and he's really good at playing villains." So I always wanted to find something for him. I knew when I met him and became friends with him, like at some point I want to have him in a
Yeah.
project. And an original draft of a Paul and Greg and Amelia type script actually had this kind of friends going at a Y concept as two 18-year-old boys going off to college and with that sort of framing. And I was running with a version of that script for a while around this idea. And ultimately I just decided I want to work with my friends, and I've heard stories of people working with younger actors, and one, it can be hard to do that casting process,
Yeah.
and two, you just run into a lot's got to come together perfectly. Just from not having as much experience, there's just a lot more variables. So I sort of reset this idea to a script with some guys in their mid 30s as the framing. And once I had that, I knew right away that Chris was going to be my antagonist, so to speak, in this story. But really, and I think now that I've seen the film come together and gotten to screen it a few times, I think both Paul and Greg are antagonists in their own way, and are both engines of their own demise. In addition to being protagonists, it's sort of, obviously it's not nearly as good as the movie Heat, because that's one of my favorite movies of all time, but similar to how you have De Niro and Pacino are kind of these protagonist antagonists kind of orbiting each other.
Yeah.
I think we didn't realize this in the script and in the production, but once we actually saw the film, we were like, oh, there is kind of this dual thing going on with these two leads. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear where you're coming from actually. And one of the nice things that you do is the setups. You know what I mean? Like you're integrating certain equipment within the film that leads us to start thinking, okay, why are all these all over the house? That's number one. Number two, some of the lines, some of the best writing. I'm telling you, some of these lines that you put together, in particular, I wrote down this one. I was like, marriage is putting up with the things that you don't like. I'm like, that is priceless. And it's actually kind of true. I mean, we all love one another, etc. But it's like, okay, that is point on. Or I've never, oh, I've never written a page without caffeine. I mean, honestly, I have, but I can totally relate to that sentiment. I was like, okay. And the number three that I love more than any one of them, it's important to have it's important to have, this is the part where I put my glasses on. This is what age does to you because you can't read anymore. It's important to have a narrative about how your life unfolded. I'm not going to
Mm,
lie. I think that probably stood out to me more than anything else. So very true. A lot of these statements are so true and they speak to the actual theme of the movie. To me, when I look at your project, one of the biggest things that stands out is yes, everyone has consequences to their choices. That's a big part of it. It's like your choices dictate kind of what the future looks like. Moreover, I almost feel like a lot of your characters, almost all of them, are kind of reeking in insecurity, so to speak. No matter how many times you tell them the same thing, they're still questioning everything.
mm.
That's just my take on that. So you've got brilliant casting, brilliant writing. The location is awesome. I certainly can't give and won't give away the ending, but I guess my question to you is now that I've kind of spilled out what I think the theme is of it, to you, what does this film mean? If I were to ask you to put it, let's say in a sentence or two, what's the real meaning of the film for you?
Yeah. I think in so many ways the film is about love, or perhaps the gross interpretations of what some people make love, right?
Yeah.
So for Paul, it's his love is like this childish, unrequited thing, right? Like that's not what real love is. This kind of obsession about Amelia that he hasn't really let go of.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side with Greg, his version of love is just trust and surveillance, right? And with both of these guys, whether it's this childish, unrequited thing going on that Paul has, or whether it's Greg and his inability to trust his wife, they both serve as downfalls for the two men, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of what this thing boils down to. And yes, there is this huge element of why these people have grown apart. But at its core, that's really what I wanted to write about is just like these people and their idea of what love is so tainted and warped by their inability to get around those tragic flaws, I think.
Oh, you betcha. And I'm not going to give away the ending except to say, could we have had a different ending? Was there ever another ending? Because I was like, really?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to answer this without spoiling, but there were several drafts of the script. I think we ended up shooting draft 11 or 12, which in my experience, that's tended to be how it goes. I think for the rest of your life, we filmed draft 14. And there were a few endings of the script in earlier drafts that didn't have as
Sure.
tragic of an ending, but they didn't feel as true. And I think at the end of the day, I'm after truth and what is the most true outcome based on who these characters are and the choices that they make. And
Yeah.
let's just say it's unfortunate for some of the characters, but
Yes. Yes. And
you know, and
moreover, I have to ask. So there's an open ending, somewhat, a small bit. Would you ever consider continuing on that story? Like the aftermath?
yeah, I think one of the things that we wanted to achieve with the ending was to leave it open to the audience's interpretation of what that means and what these characters, experienced and
Yeah.
had together during the film or not, right? And when we've screened it before, I've gotten different reactions on what people think that it means, and I like that. I think the film is about trust at the end of the day, and in some ways, like the big question of the film is what happened between Paul and Amelia, and that's Greg's big obsession, right?
Yeah.
And um, in some ways the question is almost irrelevant because Greg has a choice in what he wants to believe and that narrative that he wants to shape in his own head. And I'm glad you brought that quote up because Paul's trying to figure out why his life ended up the way it did.
Right.
That idea of personal narrative and Greg meanwhile is trying to construct a narrative of what has happened with these people close
Yeah.
to him. Even to the point where he's looking at the footage around his house in a different way to try to construct that narrative. So I sort of wanted the audience to be able to do something similar with that ending. And this is very tricky to do without spoiling, but I wanted the audience to be able to kind of put together a bit of the narrative on their own, but still with the events leading up to that very, very final scene, still give them enough, narrative closure, even if it is a bit of a darker ending.
You betcha. And of course, we know it's been to Holly Shorts. Are we nominated for anything? Have we heard anything yet?
Oh, this one not part of Holly Shorts. It's part of I think you reached out to
Chain
me
Film
following
Festival,
Chain
and you
Film
had
Festival.
won for Best Actor. I know that. The question really is anything else besides,
Yes.
because that's great, but did you get anything else as far as that goes?
We're still waiting to hear back from the other festivals we submitted
Okay.
to. So, fingers
Okay.
crossed on more acceptances. We're hoping that the Best Actor award at Chain Film Festival, as well as we won Best Narrative Feature, um,
Okay.
will be a catalyst for more acceptances and more opportunities to screen the film.
Gosh, I sure hope
Um,
so.
yeah, very grateful to Chain for taking a chance on our film, and they rewarded us. Best narrative feature was quite an honor. So we were
That's
excited about
awesome.
that and just a real testament to all the work of the cast and crew and our amazing post-production team. I could sing all their praises all day if you have any questions about anybody in those credits. So
That's awesome. Now, looking forward, is there anything else that we're working on or coming up that we can mention?
yes, just in terms of future projects
Yeah.
or this film, yeah, I have a script that I've developed. It's called The Roundabout. It's a
Okay.
wedding dramedy that takes place over the course of a weekend. A furniture maker in Brooklyn goes home to waspy New Canaan, Connecticut, where his very successful younger brother is getting married. And just before the wedding, his girlfriend dumps him, but surprise, she's still going to be at the wedding as a bridesmaid. So, um, really wanted to make another contained script, but with a little bit more scale of a wedding for this third feature. Yeah, we're having pre-production conversations, early development conversations, getting investors together. Tonally, it's going to be something along the lines of the Family Stone, so a heartfelt dramedy. There are some darker elements like Rachel getting married or the ice storm, but no, both of those movies have a dead child, so there won't be anything quite that dark. But we do want to kind of lean into some of those heavier themes around suburban melancholy and expectation, and yeah, so we're hoping to get that off the ground. Me and my crew of folks that I've worked with on these last couple pictures. So.
That is awesome. If anybody watches this today and like to contact you or meet you or see you at an event, what's the best way to reach you, social media or otherwise?
Oh yeah, Instagram seems to be the one. My contact info is also on my IMDb,
Yeah.
but yeah, Instagram Michael Pomeroy is probably the best. Although I'm not on social media as much as I used to be. I took it off my
Mm.
phone because I find it really addicting.
Yeah, no kidding, right? But it's the way though. Like nowadays, it's like, especially even as an actor, they're like, you got to be on social media and your numbers got to be up. It's a whole thing. So,
It is what it
so
is, yeah. But I refuse to do if my career doesn't launch because I refuse to be a content creator. So be it. I have no interest in running a TikTok or a YouTube channel, and if it takes me an extra 10 years to find the success I want, so be it. I don't want to do that stuff.
betcha.
It's very tiring.
Yeah, it is. I have to say, I know that actors and filmmakers say this often, which means they don't get appreciated enough. So I always like to say to you folks, without a doubt, no question about it, I am, and I'm sure I speak for thousands others, incredibly grateful for the work that you've put together and the contributions that you bring to the artistic world are just amazing. So we appreciate you.
That's very sweet of you to say. I'm very grateful to be part of this interview. This is very nice, and I appreciate your thoughtful questions on the film. It was a joy to make, and I'm excited that we're hopefully locking down distribution soon and getting it out into the world for people to see.
That's awesome. That's super exciting, actually.